is that there be constant radio and TV programming that can reach the Jewish audience. The technology is such that we could reach people we've never had the opportunity to reach before, and that's really what we're looking to do. Tell us a little bit more. You mentioned about children across the spectrum. My organization's name, of course, is Survival Through Education, so I'm obviously a big fan of education. I believe that when reaching out to people, whether they're from or not yet from, education is the key. What can you tell us about the educational opportunities that you try to teach people and train people in?
So essentially, I look at the verse that Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, offers as the mission statement of Chinuch, which incorrectly translates as Jewish education. And that verse famously is Hanuch Denar Al Pi Darkai, which really means train the child according to his way. So according to Shlomo HaMelech, Chacham Kol Adam, he's the wisest of all men ever, according to him, the way to reach a child is according to the child's way of learning. So what I do in my training is really, we investigate what does the word chinuch really mean. We avoid translations that are based on popular translations, because often those translations are based on the King James Bible, and not necessarily reflecting the actual word in Hebrew, because Lashon HaKodesh is a perfect language, so it reveals itself if one knows the meaning of the letters that combine to create that word, and also according to the meaning that our sages give it, which, as you mentioned, is part of a Masorah, it's part of a transmission from Sinai till today. So avoiding translations that are not always reflecting the actual meaning of the word, we translate the word chinuch according to our sages. We translate the word nar according to sages. Nar, unfortunately, is usually translated as a young lad, which is one of the meanings, but the majority of the time it doesn't mean that. Yishmael was called a nar, and he was all of 52 years old. At the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, Yitzhak was called a nar. He was 37. And at that time, Shnei Na'arim, in reference to Yishmael, who was 52, was called a nar. So was Eliezer, who was older than him. Yeshua was called a nar. Shelo Yamash Mitoich Ha'oyel. He never left the tent of Moshe Rabbeinu. He was all of 49. So you see that the word nar doesn't necessarily mean young lad. That's the Christian translation, and it's okay in terms of many times it does mean that. The Radak, as a simple example, points out the word nar really refers to a Mesharet Lagadol, someone who is apprenticing to someone who is a gadol. The word gadol is also mistranslated as great or big. It really means an adult, and the word adult assumes independence, self-sufficient. So
does it also imply a certain maturity?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. That's really, it goes hand in hand. So we
could be grown up, but we may not be adults
That's
yet.
right.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
As they say, getting older is mandatory, growing up is optional.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah. So the real concept of a nar is someone who is incomplete, is someone who's Adam She'enu Shalem, the words of the Radak, who's a Rishon. So instead of borrowing from a translation, we look at what does the word mean according to our sages, and then retranslate it. We do the same with the word chinuch. A mechanech is usually translated as teacher. A melamed is usually translated as teacher. A rebbe is usually translated as teacher. A menahel is usually translated as a menahel, a teacher, principal. You see, if the Torah gives different terminology, and we have, forgive me for using the terminology, audacity, chutzpah, to translate it according to popular translation, which is based on the King James Bible, which is not necessarily looking to reflect the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the words of our sages, we are at a tremendous, we're in danger of not only not translating, but misunderstanding what chinuch really is, or what a melamed is, or what a rebbe is. So, for example, the word rebbe, and it's not to put down Christianity per se, but the word rebbe is translated by the Christian Bible as rabbi, and that looks like that's good because it's not deviating from the sound of the word, or teacher. Sadly, neither of them are really correct. They're not wrong, but they're not accurate.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I thought Rebbe was from Rav Shali.
So Rav, the two-letter root Rav, really means abundance, a lot of. So whenever you want to know the meaning of a word, one way is to identify what's the 2 or 3 letter root of the Hebrew word.
Okay.
So the 2 letter root of Rebbe, as you pointed out, is Rav. Rav means an abundance. So what does a Rebbe have to have an abundance of? Information, patience, a lot of love for his student or students, and perhaps more importantly than any of the others, which you need all the others as well, is a lot of ways of reaching different minds. So I'm giving just an example of when we look more carefully at Hanuch Lenar al Pidarkoi and identify what do these words really mean. Darko, his way. So what does that mean? Oh, if I'm teaching a child when the child's not ready for the information, is that going according to his way? Of course not. If I'm teaching a child when he's ready, but I'm going at a too fast a pace, is that going according to his way? Of course not. If I'm going too slow and he's understimulated, he's really ready for much more information, he can think in the abstract, so he's really ready for more, and I'm going too slow because I'm keeping up with the rest of the middle of the class. Guess what will happen to this child? I'm not teaching Al Pi Darkai, I'm not going according to his way. Oh, so Darkai means when the child's ready, at the pace of the child, not too fast, not too slow. And it also means, is this endearing to this child? Which requires of me to know a little bit about the child, which the verse actually is predicated on, because it says, Hanuch Lenar al Pi Darkoi. Oh, so when am I allowed to start the chinuch part of the verse? When Darkoi is identified. Oh, so when the child reveals to me Darko, that requires of me to spend some time observing the child, whether it's in recess in the classroom, so I can learn what does this child gravitate to, what's his strengths.
What you're requiring is of the teacher
Yes.
and of the administration, of course, is that they understand every single student in their class, and by doing so, they'll be able to teach not just the middle 60%, the top 20%, the bottom 20% across the spectrum.
Right, so conventionally the system we have is based on economics, not on pedagogy. So I'm saying, let's revisit our pedagogy, because we've got a pretty good track record for 3,325 years from the giving of the Torah at Sinai of successfully, overall, incredibly successfully reaching every single generation, despite the fact that our children have witnessed the destruction of the first temple. We had children who witnessed the destruction of the second temple, and each time went into Galus, into exile, and their parents somehow successfully transmitted the Masorah, Torah, to the next generation, despite the fact that our children saw such calamity and tragedy in their lifetime. They've been through the Inquisition and the Crusades and the Cossacks, the Tachvatat, they've seen communism, Third Reich, and yet not only have we survived, but in every single generation, though we are very few in number, the religious community overall has been incredibly successful in transmitting Judaism to the next generation. So when we ask ourselves, well, what's the secret ingredients, if there are any, that ensures that success? So first of all, obviously, it's part of prophecy, so there's a guarantee. God tells us that we are an eternal nation. He will always be with us. But in addition to that, he gave us the tools for knowing how to reach the next generation, no matter what their tests and nisyonos, the challenges are. So Shlomo HaMelech gave it in one verse. When we start to break it apart, we start to realize, yes, I have an obligation not just to reach the 60% in the middle, but the 20% at the top, 20% at the bottom, because they are no less students of this teacher, I inverted commas teacher, because we don't really have, this sounds a little bit revolutionary, and I'm not looking to be revolutionary over here, it's just that we don't have a word for teacher, because you can't have a word in Lashon HaKodesh for something that doesn't exist, because in Lashon HaKodesh, it preceded creation. Therefore, the only words that can exist in biblical Hebrew are items that actually are part of reality. So the actual concept of teaching is essentially a one-way street. I'm here to teach, students here to listen. I'm here to talk, students here to learn. I'm here to convey the information, student is here to receive it. I'm here because I've got the information, students here because they haven't. I'm here because I have the answers, students can't come to the answers on their own. And that's the predicate, that's the assumption. There's close to zero trust in the intelligence of the child in that one-way street. And for the most part, in an economical system, it looks like that works. But according to a Torah system, My job as a teacher is to do much less teaching than is to draw out from the student the information that they are capable of producing. There's a gift of Torah, which is Matan Torah, the information the child cannot come to on their own. But after that, the most important component of the learning process is review, chazara, which the child has to do in his way. And I have to facilitate that, I have to direct that, but I'm not there to teach per se. I'm there to first teach, this is an aleph, this is a base. This is the sound of the base has a bur sound, the gimel sound has a gur sound. Oh, this when you put this nakuda under it, this combination creates this blend. And after that, if I've got many ways, darkai, Rebbe, Rav, a lot, if I've got a lot of ways of helping the child practice, review, the letters, nakudos, blending, learning vocabulary, understanding shroshim, prefix suffixes, teaching mishnayos, chazara, gemara, chazara. What I'm really here to do is facilitate. That's what a mora is a director.
You're a facilitator.
A facilitator.
A facilitator. Fantastic. Right. So you're not a teacher, you're a facilitator.
Right.
Fantastic. And now our listening audience, our viewing audience, of course, they're wondering how do they get involved with this. I always say that the way to educate the child is with PTA, parents, teachers, and Eibishter.
Right.
So what are the building blocks? You mentioned, off the air, of course, that we were talking about 10 building blocks.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about your 10 building blocks and how PTA can incorporate that into their lives.
Right. So what I've basically done is I haven't rewritten any curriculum per se, but just restructured. And under that, I call it 10 building blocks of chinuch. The first building block is mastery of the language of the Torah. That means that because we are a text-based system, whether we like it or not, we're not learning Torah the way it was originally taught. The original method was you only had a Sefer Torah, and you learned with your father, with your Rebbe of the tens, 100s, 1,000. That was in the Midbar, and it continued for the best part of 1,300 years. No Torah Sheba'al Peh was written down. So that meant when a child...
Let's clarify and explain for just a moment for those who may not know. Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah. The Torah was given over to us orally. The entire Torah, the written Torah and the oral Torah were both given to us at Har Sinai.
Right.
We got it all.
Right.
We got it all then, and from there it was transmitted from generation to generation.
Right.
It is, and I'll point this out for our listening audience, the very fact that the Torah was oral for all of those years is what makes Torah Judaism the most authentic, most flexible form of Judaism there is. Torah Sheba'al Peh and Torah Shebechsav, of course, is what makes Yiddishkeit so flexible. The other affiliations, as it were, of Judaism are incorrect because they cannot base their teachings on Torah Sheba'al Peh and Torah Shebechsav. What makes something authentic is that they're able to date themselves all the way back to Har Sinai. And that's something we need to give over to our children as well. But you're saying that was done from Har Sinai and forward.
Well, in describing the 10 building blocks, the first one is language acquisition. So that means to say that the child has mastery of the letters, knows the nakudos, the vowels, and how to blend the two, how to combine the two, sound them correctly. Once he starts reading accurately and fluently, and I'm jumping a lot of steps, but once the child can read accurately and fluently, and they also can identify in 2-3 letter root words, prefixes and suffixes, now they can start making sense of the written Torah. So for those 1,300 years, from the time it was given at Sinai, 3,500 years ago, 3,325 years ago, from that time onward, till the Mishnah, the oral law, was written down, the child would not be able to extrapolate the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral law, from the Torah. So how was it found? Because the Torah was deliberately written, dictated by Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, in such a way that the grammar breaks its own rules. Lashon Yachid, singular, is supposed to be Rabbim, and yet it's in singular. Oh, Rabbim, and it's it's supposed to be in the plural, and yet it's in singular. Oh, it's the wrong gender, it's supposed to be Zachar, but it's in the Keva, and the Keva is Zachar. You have inconsistencies throughout the text. And those are deliberately there in order that when the child has mastery of language, the first thing that will happen when he learns the text is he'll realize it does not make sense.
Wow.
And that will force him to ask questions.
Excellent.
And then
so questions are not just for Pesach. question, not just for Pesach.
The concept of Vigadol Vincha is really to have a communication with one's child, and even though it is only once a year on the night of Pesach, you can see that the entire format of the way the Chumash is written, the 5 books of Moses, is that the entire storyline is fraught with questions, and the Tariq mitzvahs, the 613 instructions plotted throughout the storyline, there's not a single instruction that stands on its own, which means there's not a single instruction that makes any sense. So even though the correct translation of the word mitzvah is really an instruction that connects the instructor, Kadosh Baruch Hu, to the instructee, the trainee, the student, through the teacher, what ends up happening is that when you read any verse, which is one of the 613, it doesn't make sense. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, love your fellow as yourself. Well, according to that, if I hate myself, how much do I have to love you? As much as I love myself. Well, I hate myself, so I can hate you. What happens if I'm suicidal? And I was like, I can kill people because the Torah says I have to love you as much as I love myself. Any single mitzvah, you'll realize immediately that it makes no sense on its own. There's missing information. So of course that missing information is the information that God gave to Moses. Moses gave to the Jewish people at Sinai for the next 40 years. And we started with our teachers and with our fathers. And when it was written down, the format was written in such a way that you would say, oh great, now I've got the missing information, the oral law, in writing, the Mishnah. Oh no, Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the then president of the Jewish people, the format is such cryptic language, it's so coded, the language is in such summarized form that the moment you start reading any Mishnah, you'll realize there's missing information. And you're forced to ask questions. Even when they wrote down the missing information of the Mishnah over the next 300 years, which commonly is known as Talmud or the Gemara, written on the Mishnah, the entire format of the Gemara is question-answer format, problem-solution. It's never a delivery of information to the student. It's constantly challenging, provoking the mind of the student based on a very simple premise. I trust your intelligence. You can figure this out with me. And so the real format of a teacher-student relationship is for the teacher to trust the mind of the student and deliver the minimal information necessary and then draw out of the student the rest of the information.
Fantastic. This is what you give over in your trainings.
That's what I give over in the theory of the training, but in the actual practical part, there's lots of different levels of how to use physical manipulatives which reflect multiple modalities, multiple learning styles, and what's commonly known as multiple intelligences. Unfortunately, we have often fallen into the same trap that the majority of the educational world has fallen into, which is identifying one type of intelligence, which is academic intelligence. But in reality, there are many intelligences. This is something that's been theorized and articulated and becoming much more popular over the last few decades, especially through Dr. Gardner. But what's really interesting, they just touched upon what Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, had said nearly 3,000 years ago in regard to Al Pi Darkoi, follow the child's way. Mm-hmm. And part of that means identify which is the child's strength. There's an intelligence called mathematical intelligence, which is numbers. It's an acute awareness. Those are 2 key words. Acute awareness of numbers and their relationship to other numbers. How a number is a quantity of something very specific, whether it's a height, a breadth, a speed. A child who's strong with numbers may be gifted in this particular intelligence. Often actuaries and accountants were gifted as children in math. So a gifted child means they've got an acute awareness of how numbers relate to each other. You've got language intelligence, which very interestingly has nothing to do with spelling, zero with grammar, and has everything to do with acute awareness, 2 key words, of words and their multiple meanings, which works very well with Lashon HaKodesh, because Lashon HaKodesh, biblical Hebrew, has many meanings in every single word. A child who's strong in their awareness of how words have many meanings are usually very verbal. Usually they've got leadership qualities. Very often they'll be very popular. Teachers who are strong in language intelligence, acute awareness of multiple meanings of words, are often teachers because they have an acute awareness, they are gifted in language. Good salespeople can be rotten in comprehension, terrible in spelling, and yet they're excellent salespeople because they have an excellent command of language. Politicians are usually language intelligent. I think it's the only intelligence they have, but that's not a politically correct statement to make. You have physical intelligence, otherwise known as kinesthetic intelligence. Sportsmen, athletes, dancers, they are gifted in this area, which is hand-leg coordination. Good basketball players are usually very good in this area of kinesthetic body intelligence. You have musical intelligence, very powerful. Musical intelligence is acute awareness of sound, tempo, rhythm. If you have a child, for example, who's strong in musical intelligence, if you teach them any information using song with tempo, rhythm, beat, you have penetrated that internal intelligence, so you found an entrance which, if the child's not good with abstract thinking, but really good with music, you can almost reach them with anything through music. This has been proven by a veritable scientist, Professor Suzuki. I'm not going into it now. You can Google where he demonstrates children between the age of 3 and 6 play a perfect Mozart concerto. And anyone who wants to sign up for his program, the mother has to sign up before pregnancy and then play the same concerto thousands of times during pregnancy. Then after childbirth, for the first 3 years, the same concerto. And then after about 3 years, brings the child for the first time to Professor Suzuki, who gives the child for the first time ever in his life a violin to the scale of the child's chest and arms, and shows how to move the bow against the strings. And all the child needs to do now is reconstruct the music that's been played tens of thousands of times in his mind with the physical movement. Right. And within weeks, he will line up several hundred students between ages 3, 4, and 6 years old playing a perfect Mozart concerto. And the audience, which may have thousands of people in the audience, are in awe of these child prodigies who are all gifted in music. And the reality is, no, their mind was trained to become acutely aware. And what he has demonstrated is that anybody may have a certain starting point in any specific intelligence, but in his particular case, he proved that in musical intelligence, you don't have to be musically intelligent or unintelligent. If your mind has been trained to pay attention to sound, rhythm, beat, you can actually become gifted at a very young age and then be accused of being brilliant. And yet really, it's natural to the child.
Fantastic. For just a moment, allow us to pause for station identification. Those of you tuning in, you are listening at 97.5 FM on your radio dial. You're joining us on the internet at jrootradio.com, and we're very glad you're here. We've yet to touch on, although we've spoken very, very briefly, we've yet to speak more in depth about the kiruv aspects of our program, but this is your kiruv connection, your one-stop source for kiruv rechokim, kiruv krovim, and chizuk krovim. We endeavor to give you the tools you need to be able to give nachas to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from all of his children. Shout out to Nissen from jrootradio.com for his dream and bringing all this to you. Rabbi Rietti, let's talk about kiruv for a moment. We're talking about education of a child, how you advise people and you guide people on how to educate their children according to their way. Tie this into kiruv rechokim. You know, a lot of us listening in, myself, we're aware of people who are either not yet from, they're off the derech, they're in risk for going off the derech, and a lot of these tools can be applied into, helping people find their way. From a Torah perspective, you mentioned, of course, Rav Moshe Wolfson is your Das Torah, who you consult with, and you discuss your educational programming and so on and so forth. Tell us, from a kiruv perspective, if we're trying to reach somebody, how can we utilize your technique? How can we, you mentioned, of course, that you consult with various schools around the country. So certainly people could reach out to you about that. But how does that tie into making a difference in the lives of Acheinu Kol Beis Yisrael?
Right. The question is very broad.
Purposely.
Okay.
I'd like to see where you could take us. Not a problem.
Right. So I'm going to tie in the answer to the previous question with this one, if I may.
Please.
Of the 10 building blocks, I'm just going to mention them very briefly. You've got language acquisition. The next two are twins, which is the storyline of the Torah, 5 books of Moses. And contained in the storyline, as we mentioned, are 613 instructions. Anything a child will ever learn on the legal side of Torah must find its roots somewhere in the Tarek Mitzvahs and the 613 instructions. Anything a child will ever learn on the non-legal side has to find its roots somewhere, most of the time, in the storyline. So in these two building blocks, what we do is we help teach teachers how to reach children so that in a matter, and this sounds bizarre, but it takes not weeks, months, or years, it takes hours to teach children memory systems whereby they have files in their mind for 613 mitzvahs and all the storyline of the Chumash. Because this gives them an amazing, immediate, superficial familiarity with the entire structure of the Torah. Because Mishnayos is a Perush, Mishnah is really a commentary to the Targum Mitzvahs. Gemara is a commentary to the Mishnah, which is a commentary to the Targum Mitzvahs. Halacha are the legal conclusions based on the Gemara's discussion of the Mishnah, which itself is a commentary to Targum Mitzvahs. So halacha, Jewish law, really is the bottom line. How do I be a Jew, give nachas to Hashem, based on the application of this mitzvah in my life? So that takes care of the legal side. The non-legal side, Medrash, Agadata, Zaya, Kisvi Ari, Musa, Hashkafa, Chasidus, for the most part, will find its source somewhere in the storyline. So if you can give a child the ability to make sense of text based on mastery of the language, that's Lashon HaTorah building block number one, and you give them initially a superficial, later on we'll go into incremental levels of detail, but initially a superficial understanding of the entire 5 books of Moses. That means they know what's going on in every single chapter of 187 chapters of the Chumash. And they know a simple understanding of all 613 mitzvahs. You have prepared files in their brain for whatever future details they will learn gets filed in that, and the child is automatically endeared to learn and want to know more about that subject. Building block number 4, which is what is going to be the answer to your question, or an answer to your question, is called contextual learning. That word sounds like a fancy word. Context means perimeters, to give you the big picture, the panoramic view. It's actually the correct translation of the word hashkafa. The word hashkafa really comes from the word mashkov. Mashkov is a lentil on top of 2 mezuzahs, doorposts. From the lentil perspective, you've got a panoramic view from above going down. Lahashkif means to look down from above. So that means hashkafa really means God's panoramic view of reality from his perspective. So when we're teaching hashkafa, when we're talking about how to understand God's Torah in his mindset, what we're really talking about is how do we access as much of his mind, his panoramic view of reality. So in order to facilitate that for children, give them the very big picture, the biggest picture possible in time and space, we've created what is often called a history timeline, which means we've got photos, pictures, and props, starting with Brias Olam, creation of the universe, all the way to the year 6000, the end date when Messiah has to have come by, according to the Gemara and Sanhedrin, Sadik Zayin, Amud Aleph going on to Amud Beis. That's the cutoff point, that's the expiration date by which the Messiah has to have come.
Excuse me just a moment. These pictures and photos and props that you're talking about, are they available at jewishinspiration.com?
Yes,
okay.
They're available. That's not a commercial because
that's not.
you can only get them if either you get the training or you get the training DVDs.
Exactly.
Because I'm not interested in selling the product if you don't have the right support to be able to know the many applications that it has.
Exactly.
Because it's not just pictures.
Exactly. This is not a commercial. However, I'm encouraging educators out there to reach out to us to find out about Rabbi Rietti's product, which I'll ask them to continue to describe in a moment. And if you're a parent, ask your menahel, your moros, your rebbes, ask your children's teachers to reach out as well, because this makes the difference.
The history timeline, which we're calling contextual learning, building block number 4, essentially is made up of 43 photos, starting with Brias Olam, creation of the universe, starting with the 6th day. That's when Adam, man, was created. He was created FFC, from creation.
Ooh.
Yeah,
very good.
Then the only person you can apply that term to, him and his good wife Eve.
FFC
from
That's
creation.
That's a new one. I've heard of FFB from brain. I've heard of FTP, firmer than parents, but FFC is a new one.
Okay. So from the 6th day of creation, which is when we really start measuring time, which I'm not going to go into now. That's why the age of the universe is not a problem for us to discuss whether it's 6 days or beyond, because we don't measure time till the 6th day. So that's a separate discussion. So we start measuring time. Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of the 6th day, creation of Adam, not his physical sinews, but the fact that man has the ability to make choices. So we have 43 pictures starting from the sixth day of creation all the way till Tchias HaMesim, resurrection of the dead. And what we do is we have physical props for almost every single one of these pictures. And either outside or in a large gym or in a very large dining room, I'll give a presentation to 20, 30 or 100 plus children in the audience.
How old? What age?
So I don't want to sound controversial, but there are several schools that have my training that I helped start the school or that part of the program of the school. So we actually start teaching this, and I know this sounds ridiculous for 3 and 4 or 5 year olds. And it sounds ridiculous because most of us don't realize that children are capable with pictures that represent concepts to understand the unfolding of time. But the vast majority of kids I work with, I would say from 10 years old onwards, even though I designed this really for first grade onwards. The schools that really ran with this, I discovered, they started teaching this in preschool. And I've actually gone to the preschools to give the timeline presentation at their level using simple vocabulary. Where and you can go into their classroom. I've actually had situations where a 3-year-old corrected her 11-year-old in describing the sequence of Adam and Noach and Avram and who lived when and how old they were. So it's not a question of being. It's not a question of the information.
It only sounds ridiculous because we're not used to it.
We're not used to how much children can absorb.
Right.
The child's mind is so brilliantly absorbent because that's how HaKadosh Baruch Hu designed them. Then the first 2 years, the child takes in everything they see and hear and experience. And in that absorbent period, what the child is basically doing is not opening their mouth to articulate a single word. They're hardly speaking at all because they're busy taking in all that they experience and trying to make sense out of it. They are matching words with images. Mummy, tati, brother, sister, floor, ceiling, cup, water. And in that period, they are taking millions and millions of pieces of information. They cannot give back to us because we don't see, but that's an invisible process that's taking place. So by the time the child starts to speak, there's a lot of information in there which they need us to explain to them the meaning of that information. And the most powerful way to do that is by role modeling. The next most powerful way is to present pictures that represents information. So if a child knows, for example, in language acquisition, the child already knows the word chair, table, hand, and they may be starting to say it with their lips, which is a very complicated process. To be able to say table, the b sound, they've got to close their lips. L, in the table, they've got to touch the roof of their mouth with their tongue. It's a process. It takes time. But in teaching children to read, when you have a picture, speaks 1,000 words, a picture of a table, and then you tell the child, this is table, you turn over the picture, and it's written in English, table, or shulchan in Hebrew, and you teach that word, and they hear it many times, and they see the picture, they know what a table is, they experience the table, they've sat at a table, they've worked on a table, and here's a picture of a table, and they're told this is a table, and they see that these letters equal that, but they don't yet know these letters, they're slowly learning the letters. These children actually end up learning to read faster, not in an artificial way and not with artificial pressure, but because of these pictures. So I'm just giving you a very simple example where we've actually created photographs for the most frequently reappearing words in Chumash, so that a child can access 81% of Chumash Bereshis with only 200 Shoroshim. Fantastic. We've created 303 to add on a little bit more, but these 303 will give a child approximately 84%. That's out of 16,000 words, 13,000.
Come back to the Shalshel Simsar.
Sorry.
No
Thank
problem.
you for keeping focused. So in contextual learning, what we have is children are exposed to 43 pictures and these physical props. I have what I call a 1,000 block, which is actually a cube made of beads. It's in a perfect cube, and it's made of 10 levels. Each level has 100 beads, so it's 10 times 10 on the top surface, and there's 10 surfaces of this. And it actually contains 1,000 beads. So I show the children this cube, and I place it at 6 points in the timeline, so the children understand, oh, here's the first 1,000 years, second 1,000, 3,000, etc. And then we walk down this timeline, and as I walk down, I show the picture, creation of the universe. I uncover a model of the solar system, of the planets going around the sun. We get to the Mabul, the flood. I uncover a prop of a globe, take a bucket of water, pour it on top of the globe. We uncover the life of Avram. There's a hammer with a Lego idol, smash the idol with the hammer. So you've got a very simple prop matching the picture, and what the children are experiencing, and that's really the key word, they are experiencing time and space till they've covered in a matter of about 8 minutes the entire 6,000 years. Then what we do is we layer. We start giving layers of emunah. This is not probably the platform for me to go into detail, but unfortunately we're stuck with a translation that's borrowed from the King James Bible, which is problematic because the word emunah comes from the word amen. Amen means, I agree, this is true. The word emunah is typically translated as faith or belief, which is okay for other religions, but it's not okay for us because ours is not based on belief or faith. It's based on an eyewitness account of an event that's the greatest event that ever took place in world history, not just Jewish, and it's also the greatest claim ever made, and that is national divine revelation. So our mitzvah of emunah, out of Tariq mitzvahs, the verse that is the source of the mitzvah to have emunah in Hashem is Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Tziticha Meretz Mitzrayim, chapter 20 in the book of Exodus. I am your constant power, and I'm deliberately not following typical translations which are Christian-based. Please forgive me. It's just our religion has the meaning of the words. Yud Kei Vav Kei means higher, have every year, always was, is, and will be. So it really means constant one. Elokim really means power of all powers. That's the meaning that's given in Shulchan Aruch and Code of Jewish Law in Orach Chaim, the first section, subsection 5. El means power. Elokim means powers. Elokim means he is the one power behind all powers. Anochi, I am, Yud Kei Vav Kei, constant, Elokecha, your constant power, Asher Tziticha, and you know I am, because you experienced me when I took you out of Mitzrayim, of Egypt. We saw every power in the universe lose power, out of control. Water turned to blood. Water is a power. No, it was being powered by some other power. Earth turned to lice. Wind was being blown, and blowing the arbe, the locusts, the grasshoppers, in the easterly direction, then back westly. Oh, so there's another power controlling wind. Earth, water, light, darkness lost control. It was completely dark for the Egyptians, totally light for the Jews. Wild animals, wild. Well, doesn't wild mean out of control? No. These wild animals were being controlled. They only attacked the Egyptians, didn't scratch a single Jew. Oh, so the Jewish people experienced a power in control of all other powers, be it plague, light, darkness, wind, earth, and finally, life and death. In 1 second, every single firstborn in Egypt is alive by midnight, and 1 second later, they're all dead. So this power introduces himself as, I am the power of life and death, earth, water, fire, barad, the hail, etc.
Foundations of emunah.
So our foundation of emunah is conviction. Rabbi Shimon Schwab of blessed memory told me himself. I was zoich to spend several Shabbosim with my family, just us, with him in his home in Washington Heights, and also on Pesach in the Catskills once. He told me, unfortunately, we translate the word animam, the term animam ibn Shlema, based on someone else's religion. So we translate it as I believe with complete faith. It's a very weak claim to say that way, and it's just such a pity that we're not borrowing from what our sages tell us the words mean. Because animam in Be'emunah Shlema, according to Rabbi Shimon Schwab, told me, should really be translated as I am convinced with absolute certainty. That's a very different statement than saying I believe with complete faith. Because I believe with complete faith means I don't know, but I believe anyway. And that's okay for the other religions because they are based on private revelations, no witnesses. It's not okay for us because that's not the translation of the words. Emunah means amen. I agree.
And
this
all
is
of
true.
this is based on the building blocks that you're teaching.
Yes.
Okay, I'm reiterating
Okay.
that. This is brilliant. Okay, please.
So now
we have around 10 minutes left, so just please, share with us.
So in the history
Wonderful.
timeline, after we've given the 6,000 years, we then do layers. Layer number 1 is topography and archaeology. So with the young children, I will show them on an overhead projector. We'll go through places that are on planet Earth that are still there from 4,000+ years ago. This is based on Maimon Mordechai from Rabbi Mordechai Schwab, the older brother of Rabbi Shimon Schwab. He was a very special tzaddik. So in his Sefer Maimon Mordechai, Simon Samach Beis, he talks about the importance of teaching our children experiential emunah. And he gives the examples of show them the places that are still on planet Earth that the Torah describes and was given to us 3,325 years ago, but even preceded the giving of the Torah, and are still there today. So, for example, the first place I go with the children is chapter 2 in Genesis. Now, chapter 1, 31 Psukim, is describing the creation of the universe and planet Earth. So the actual story, so to speak, of where the story really takes off is in chapter 2, creation of man. That's where it really begins. And as early as chapter 2, God goes out of his way to mention 4 rivers. Pishon, says Rashi, is the River Nile. And I will show them a satellite photo of the River Nile, the delta coming out of Egypt and wiggling its way all the way down into South Africa. It's 4,168 miles long, almost 4,200 miles long. It's the longest river in the world. It's still there screaming, Amen. I agree, your Torah is true. I'm still here giving testimony. Oh, the Tigris River, Hidekel. I happen to know it's called Hidekel because my mother, Aleh Shalom, from Baghdad, was born on the Tigris River. Hidekel, in Arabic today, Dekel still refers to the Tigris River. It's still there. Frat, the Euphrates, oh, it's still there. And Mesopotamia, the famous cradle of civilization, the earliest evidence of human civilization is in that fertile crescent between these two great rivers where Avram Avinu originally is from. Oh, he came from Ur. Ur is still on the map. I will show them an overhead projector photo of Ur. It's still there. The very first...
How do we know?
Well, Baghdad, as you know, Iraq hasn't really gone very far in the last 4,000 years. Nebuchadnezzar's palace, the ruins are still there outside of Baghdad. Ur has never changed its name, nor has Haran. These are places you can actually Google these places. Ur still has, from its own oral transmission of people living there, that this is the original Ur, and never changed its name. And it's an exact same locale. So is Haran, which is in today Turkey. These are places that you can actually Google. I have photos of them. Rabbi Deutsch of the Living Torah Museum, which is
fantastic.
You have to get him on the
Fabulous. He's wonderful.
Yeah, he's already produced Bereshis and Shemos, a illustrated book of Genesis and Exodus, and he's doing for the other 3 as well, where you will see physical artifacts and places that are still in existence on planet Earth that are part of what the Torah is describing 3,000 years ago.
So our Torah is true. We believe in our Torah. What you're telling us is to give over to our children that it's true. We don't just believe that it's true, but according to Rav Shimon Schwab, we are convinced beyond a shadow of a doubt.
And we can demonstrate that. We can demonstrate it because not only do we have unbroken transmission from the time it was given, but as I go through topography, we stop at the time of the Roman Empire with the Arch of Titus. These are places, physical places still there. Maras Machpelah in Hebron, oh, it's still there. The Keva, the grave of Rachel, Rachel Imenu, still there. People still go. It's not so safe today. Near Petra Jordan is Har Hahar, where Aaron HaKohen is buried. These are places that are still there. So you help the children realize, oh, you've been to Hebron, you've been to Maras Machpelah, who's buried there? Oh, Avram Avinu is buried there. Oh, Adam and Rishon, Chav is buried there. Oh, Sarah Imenu is buried there. And you start helping the children realize that when they're learning Chumash, it's not just a history book. This is reality. This is part of my Masorah of thousands of years ago. After we've done topography and archaeology, which is, if you like, a power of science, it doesn't have a religious agenda.
Right.
This is just physical places on planet Earth. Some have been dug up, but the vast majority of it's still there.
Okay.
Then what we do is we do genealogy. Now that we've, so to speak, shown that the Torah is a document, and I have quotes from very famous archaeologists who are telling us that even the die-hard scholars who wanted to claim that the Torah was not written at the dictate of God, but by various people, realize that there's no place on planet Earth that is so rich in its evidence, both on the surface and beneath, in verifying the accuracy of its history than the land of Israel. The biblical accounts in the book of Joshua name places, battles, mountains, Har Eval, Har Gerizim. These are places that are still there and you can visit. Shechem, where Yosef was buried, originally came from there when he was with his brothers, Dosan, very close to Shechem. Oh, he's buried there, he's still there. These are places you show the children. So then what we do now is we show genealogy. We've already verified that the Torah is true according to archaeology and topography. Now we go to, and this is Ramban, Perek Yud Pasuk Hey in Bereshis. Third paragraph there, amazing. He's really quoting the Rambam, but it's very powerful. He shows you why is it in chapter 5, in chapter 10 and in chapter 11 of Genesis, why does the Torah spend so much ink showing you the overlap of the generations? Adam gave birth to Shes, who gave birth to Enosh, to Canaan, all the way down to Noach, and Noach all the way to Avram. So he starts to show you, watch the overlap, because when you look at the math, Adam dies in the year 930. Lamech, his great-great-great, going 8 greats, grandson, the father of Noach, is born in the year 874. So Adam dies here, Lamech is born in 874, Adam dies in 930, Lamech knew his great-great-great-great-great-grandfather for 56 years. So explains Ramban, Lamech heard the story of Gan Eden from the aide, the witness who was there. He also heard it from his father and grandfather. He heard it from Mr. Shelach and from Chanoich and from his great-grandfather, all the way back to Adam Arishon. He heard it from all of them, because they also heard it from Adam. Lamech tells the story of Gan Eden to Noach. So now you got 3 generations. Adam, Lamech, Noach. Noach dies in the year 2006. Avram Avinu was born in the year 1948. Avram Avinu, not so well known, was not a teenager. Anyone who here has teenagers will understand why some animals eat their young. But Avram Avinu was not a teenager when he smashed the idols of his father's home. He was actually 60 years old. This is Meduyat from Perek Eliezer, Perek Havav, and Sefer Yasha. He was thrown into a dungeon in 2 different places for the next 10 years, 70. At 70, he was then given a second chance to agree to Nimrod, that Nimrod was the real creator. He failed that test and was thrown into Kivshan HaEsh. He was 70 years old. Avram Avinu destroyed the Slamim, the Avodah Zarah, the idols in his father's shop, so to speak, when he was 60. What was he doing from the time he was hiding in a cave for 13 years and left the cave after 13 years old, according to Perek Eliezer, Perek Havav, the Vilna Gaon over there is very interesting. What was he doing in the interim period? Sefer Yasha, Perek Eliezer claim he went to live with Noach. He learned with Noach for 39 days, weeks, months, years. He actually knew Noach for 58 years total. Seder Olam tells us in Perek Aleph that he knew Noach for 58 years. The simon to remember that is Noach is 58. It's Gematria, numerical value 58. He knew Noach for 58 years, but he studied under him for 39. So now you got Adam, tells Lamech the story of Gan Eden, tells it to Noach. Noach tells Avram Avinu of the 2 stories, the greatest events in world history. Gan Eden, Garden of Eden, and the Mabul, the deluge, the flood. Avram Avinu teaches everything he knows to his son Yitzhak and Yaakov. The overlap between Yitzhak and Avram is 60 years, and he knew his grandson, Avram Avinu, knew Yaakov Avinu, Jacob, for 15 years. He was 15 years old when his grandfather died. So you got Adam, Lamech, Noach, Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Yaakov goes down to Egypt, and he teaches everything he knows to all his family. We're in the same Ramban, Perek Yud Pasuk Hey. Teaches everything he knows to his family, including, but especially Levi, Kahas, his grandson, and his great-grandson, Amram. Amram is a young man who's the father of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, when he learns from his great-grandfather, Yaakov Avinu. Adam, Lamech, Noach, Avram, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, Amram, Avi Moshe. Separating Moshe Rabbeinu is only 4 generations from Adam. From Moshe Rabbeinu till us, Moshe Rabbeinu Har Sinai, what I'm showing the children is, you are part of a heritage that's not just at Sinai. Your genealogy goes back to Adam. You've got unbroken genealogy from the first man. And at Sinai, you've now got thousands of chains from all the different families that have kept Torah in Eretz Yisrael, in Bavel, in Galus, in exile, all around the world. Jews have been spread everywhere, and it's the same Sefer Torah. Same Shabbos, same Kashrus, same Tefillin, same Mezuzah, same Taras Mishpacha, same laws of purity for family that we're practicing for 3,320 years.
Fantastic.
From the time of Moshe Rabbeinu.
If you want to jump, I've shared the math before. 3,325 divided by 80. If you want to take an average lifespan, you're only looking at 42 and a half, 43 people.
Right.
So, connecting us to the creation with the four generations, we're talking 47 people.
Right.
47 people connect us directly, and it's
Right.
what we've been doing consistently throughout,
Right.
around the world, no matter where you go.
Right.
Fantastic.
The average age over time has been less than that. So the typically, scientifically speaking, on averages, so if you took a 50 as a generation, which is still quite conservative, because let's say in medieval times, the average age of an adult was in the mid-40s.
Right.
So 80 is much more to our standards. So you're right, if you had this 80-year-old and this 80-year-old and this 80-year-old, and there were 47 of them lined up, that's how you get back to Mount Sinai. Even if it was 50, which is a very conservative number, it would still be 66 generations. When children realize that, and many times there's a good 60 people in the audience, they start, if I would be 50 and you're 50, you're 50, and we add up, so we're already going from today all the way back to Mount Sinai.
Fantastic.
Just not that far away.
Right.
So it's an excellent point. Yeah. Another layer we do, I'm just going to touch on this very briefly, is Nevuah. That's really the clincher.
Great.
Because Nevuah means prophecy. And a very serious element of prophecy is not saying what might happen, but what will happen. That's obviously dangerous and extremely risky. I give examples from Christianity, not, God forbid, to put them down, because we don't need to put down other religions to strengthen our position, but just to give examples of how dangerous it is to play prophecy if you can't fulfill the conditions. Condition number 1, you have to demonstrate knowledge of the future. 2, control of the future. That doesn't mean that the prophet himself is showing control of the future. He's showing he's got knowledge of the future, but the future event might take place after his lifetime, but has to demonstrate that knowledge was also tied to a power that controls the future. Control of nature, control of the destiny of nations, civilizations, empires. You want prophecy to not make sense. You want Jewish prophecy it has to not make sense.
Except
it has
for
to
in
be
hindsight.
Irrational. It has to be so ridiculous, bizarre, literally, so that when it does happen, one is forced to concede, there's a power controlling time, controlling history, controlling nations, controlling events to unfold so that these prophecies definitely will come true. So when you put the criteria together, which is not easy to fulfill, and then start asking, well, in other religions that have made the attempt and show what a terrible disaster it became for them, that they always have to turn to faith as the answer to every problem. Well, we believe anyway. In Judaism, it doesn't work that way. And if it does, we've got children or adults who are weak in their emunah because it's not conviction, it's a matter of culturally this way, which only stands up to a point. But the moment their intellect really kicks in, or their intellect is challenged from an outsider, a non-religious Jew or a non-Jew, who asks in an unprovocative way, not even challenging, just out of curiosity, so why are you religious? Or why do you wear these black boxes? Or why do you only eat this matzah on Passover? You're so strict about the laws of kosher, etc. If I don't have an intelligent answer, having been in yeshiva for 10, 15, or including Kollel, maybe 20 years of Jewish education, and I cannot articulate in more than perhaps 30 or 60 seconds an intelligent answer, so not only what do I look like in the minds of others who might be asking me, out of curiosity, not challenging me, but what do I look to myself as if I can't answer that intelligently, and I start waking up realizing, the reason why I do things is because I'm a robot. I was raised this way, and then where's my connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? It's a very weak one. So it's extremely valuable to have a tool such as the history timeline, where we will take pictures of and place them down. This is when this nevuah was given, this prophecy. Let's check off if it was ever fulfilled. And we'll go through 21 major prophecies and identify when was it given, was it fulfilled, and if it was, we'll lay down a green check. And then as we go through, walk down the timeline, literally, the children experience, this is when God promised Abraham, you will be an eternal nation. You will be thrown out of your land. You will be thrown out not once but twice. There'll be 70 years gap in between. The second time you'll be thrown out, you will be spread throughout the whole world. You remain few in number. And you start going through all these prophecies and show when did they happen. Out of 21, the children will start counting up the checks. 18 came true. And the only 3 that haven't come true, haven't happened yet. All the Jewish people moving to the land of Israel, Kibbutz Galias, and some might want to say, you know what? Whoa, after 2,000 years of not seeing the land, let alone living there, almost half the Jewish people in the world today live in the land of Israel. I'm not saying that's the beginning of the Gula, I'm not saying that, but that's an interesting fact, because that observation helps us understand how God is on schedule. And the next 2, Mashiach building Bayis Shlishi, the 3rd temple, and finally Tchias HaMesim, resurrection of the dead.
Fantastic.
So children see in a matter of minutes, this is the beginning of time, here's the end of time, and this is where I am. Oh my gosh, I'm at 11:58 on a 12-hour clock. I'm just 2 minutes off midnight. I'm just a few inches off the 6,000th year. I'm in year 5,773. I am so close to the end. And God has kept his promises so far. Do you think the last 3 he might keep, or definitely will?
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you for your patience.
Oh my goodness, it's been exhilarating. It's been inspirational. I'm so glad you were able to join us.
Baruch Tiyeh.
Absolutely. Rabbi Rietti, of course, can be found at jewishinspiration.com, or you could give us a call if you have any questions about the program. You could text us at 718-801-1923. That's 718-801-1923. You could reach us on our Kiruv hotline at 1-800-98-KIRUV. That's 1-800-98-KIRUV. Or you could email us at david@david.com. You have been joining us at Your Kiruv Connection, your one-stop for information, inspiration, for all things pertaining to Kiruv Rechokim, Kiruv Krovim, and Chizuk Krovim. Things we need to do to give nachas to HaKadosh Baruch Hu from all of his children, how to plant the seeds of emunah, of Amen, with Rabbi Jonathan Rietti. We thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.